Welcome everyone to the second plenary session of this year's Wroclaw Global Forum. I'm Lee Feinstein. I'm very pleased to be here and honored to be here for this session, which is an important one, not only for Poland, not only for the United States, but for transatlantic relations and for the global economy as well. And we're very lucky to have a very good and diverse panel. But before I very briefly introduce them, let me just say that the area of energy is one where it pays to be modest, because what we thought we knew turned out really not to be true. And there have been developments in this area that have been surprising, and we're now referring to them as a revolution. And I can recall working on a Blue Ribbon Commission panel with two of America's most esteemed experts, the first American Energy Secretary and a later Energy Secretary, Jim Schlesinger and John Deutsch. And as a member of that panel now, our new Energy Secretary, Secretary Moniz, talking about America's energy future. And the word shale did not appear in this report. And that was not very long ago. And even as recently as 2009, the U.S. Department of Energy was projecting indefinite dependence on imported natural gas, along with rising prices for decades to come. But by 2010, that picture had changed. So this is a very dynamic space, and I think what we'll find in the course of this discussion is it's dynamic not just in the United States, but that there are significant changes globally. So we have an interesting panel, a transatlantic panel, with people present here in the room and as well connected to us electronically as well. You have most of the names in your program, but there have been a couple of changes. But I'm very pleased that Prime Minister Bielecki, who is presently the president of the Economic Council to Prime Minister Tusk, is joining us on the panel, as well as Jan Kulczyk, to my left, chairman of the board of directors of Kulczyk Investments. And to my right, Beata Stelmach, the Deputy Foreign Minister of the Republic of Poland, and a fellow American who has one foot in Germany and another in the United States, John Schmitz, who was the youngest Deputy White House counsel for the first President Bush, and is a very distinguished international lawyer who is quite knowledgeable about the energy scene in both continents. And I'm also very pleased that my colleague and good friend, Johnathan Elkind, will be joining us by video, I hope by video. He's the Acting Assistant Secretary for Political and International Affairs at the Department of Energy. He is no stranger to Poland and visited more than once during the course of our time here. And if I may, I'm also very pleased that the former National Security Advisor of the United States, Steve Hadley, is joining us. Welcome, and we're very honored that you could join us for the forum. Okay, so I'm going to start it off with a round of questions, and I don't have to ask my fellow panelists to be candid because I know them, so I know that they will be. I'd like to start with Prime Minister Bielecki, not only because you're the senior-most person on the panel, but as well because I know that you have been intimately involved in trying to think very broadly about what Poland's energy mix ought to look like. So I wonder if you might give us a few words about how you envision the future of Poland's energy mix. In the United States, we talk about an all-of-the-above strategy. How does it look like from your point of view?
Thank you. Thank you very much for your kind question. This is not that much my view, but a group of quite young employees of the office of the Prime Minister, who, at least to my best knowledge, for the first time in our short history of transition, have developed a quite interesting econometric model answering that question with a quite long term time horizon, because the model could forecast the optimal mix up to 2050. And it took us 8 months or a little bit more to sit down and to work on it. And the model for the time being has been is a warning signal that I should maybe not give too many details.
It's an energy surge, Mr. Prime Minister. Yeah.
But the model we try to produce is answering the question, how could we produce at the least cost the necessary supply of power for Poland. So, assuming the power supply necessary for Poland, we have been looking for the least cost of production. However, the model is quite flexible, so theoretically we could go and try to optimize instead of the cost, the lowest cost. We could go and look for the lowest emission, for example, of CO2, or theoretically, if we are more focused on security issue, we could focus on the limited input of energy from outside. And as you know, this is a challenge for Poland. So what I'm saying is that the model is quite flexible. And what have come up from the model so far is first of all that again, let me re-emphasize. I try to look at the lowest cost of production. But if we look at the mix from this perspective, in a medium term, but actually even in a longer term, the level of the power production facilities based on coal and the lignite should be upheld, so constant, contrary to the opinions that we should quickly go down and reduce the manufacturing base of energy, which is made out of lignite or hard coal. No, the model clearly indicates that we should at least uphold the existing production level. Then, of course, the second observation or result, which is very clear for everybody, is that we should increase our capacity based on gas. Also, due to the very simple reason, in Poland, we would have more and more problem with flexible production of energy, because we have, of course, the much higher demand in the peak times than the average demand is distributed. So that's why the gas power plant could provide us with increased flexibility. And this flexibility is particularly important for us from the necessary reserve level, because in Poland we assume that on top of the peak demand of energy, we should have at least 18% of reserved power to be provided if necessary. And thirdly, in advance of your delicate question about the nuclear, of course, the probability and the rationale behind the construction of the power plant depends very much on the price of the CO2 emission. So, however, looking at the present and probably in the midterm, the future forecast of the development of the regulatory framework, I would say that the final decision on the construction of the nuclear plant in Poland should be rather postponed. And then the last maybe controversial assumption or conclusion, but it comes out from the assumption that we were based on the lowest cost of production of the energy, of course, is that we should therefore stick to the lowest possible according to the EU directive of renewables in the energy mix. So a little bit contrary to Germans, where they could in next 30 years goes to up to 80% of participation in the energy mix. We rather should stick to the lowest, unless the base for optimization is not changed. Yes, if we want to be focused more on environment, but also even on energy independence, then we could increase quickly the share of renewables in the mix of Polish energy.
Thank you very much. It's very comprehensive and I think very direct and informative, and a very good segue to what I hope is an effective transatlantic connection to my good friend, Secretary Elkind. Johnathan, can you hear us?
Yes, I can, and I'm a little bit amazed, but very glad that that is the case.
Well, let me tell you, we can really hear you here. It's a little bit like Oz talking. So everyone will be paying extremely close attention. I wonder if I could ask you, for this audience, and you're well familiar with Poland and Central Europe, I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about America's approach to energy self-sufficiency, if that's a right way to put it, or our all of the above strategy. And I know that people here, as you would expect, will be particularly interested in hearing about changes, developments, and the prospect for LNG exports, and in particular to this part of the world.
Well, thank you very much, and I hope that I'm not speaking too loud. If I am, please make a signal to me. First, I must offer sincere apologies on behalf of our Deputy Secretary, Daniel Kahneman, who hopes to be there in person. Unfortunately, a change of schedule from the White House dictated the necessity for him to return home to the States faster than he had anticipated. And I wish that I were able to be present with you there today. There's a great deal of shared challenge, common challenge that the United States faces and that Poland and other important partners in Central Europe face as well. And so I'll talk a bit about those topics and the questions that you posed there a moment ago, Lee. It is rather fundamental and in that regard, perhaps old news, but worth reminding ourselves that some of the shared challenges that we face go to energy as the underpinning of our respective economic vitality, energy as a key determinant of the environmental quality in which we live today and in which our children and grandchildren will live going forward, and certainly the very important questions that you were touching on regarding energy security and thus the national security in which our countries find themselves. This has been a very dynamic period in the United States, where in the last decade we have gone from the presumption that we would be encountering and trying to manage on the supply side times of increasing scarcity to now the realization that in the hydrocarbon arena, the United States has for the time being a situation of plenty to manage. Already the increases in our natural gas production in the United States have had many consequential impacts, including that as the price dynamics have shifted, the production of electricity from coal in this country for the first time about a year ago was equaled by the level of electricity produced from natural gas. And that shifts from one month to the next, depending on respective prices. But even that change is entirely remarkable because for so many decades, coal was roughly 50% of the baseload of the power production in the United States, and coal has dropped now to somewhere in the 30% to 40% range. So big changes are afoot, not only in natural gas, but also in production of crude oil in the United States. This all has happened as a consequence of the technological developments, the industrial innovation that has occurred in the unconventional, the shale gas and shale oil space. And so it's an important part of the picture that is unfolding in the United States. These developments lead many in this country to talk about energy self-sufficiency, sometimes energy independence. Of course, the point that will not be lost on the audience there in the hall is that energy independence is really, if anything, a rhetorical flourish more than an economic possibility. We live within global energy markets, and so even if our degree of production rises dramatically as it has in the United States over recent years, we will remain part of a global marketplace in regard to all of these fuels. Let me touch on the topic of nuclear power, which is another very important element of the picture in the United States today. And I know that there are active discussions that are going on both in Poland and elsewhere in Central Europe on this topic today. From our vantage point, it is clear, and the President has underscored this, that nuclear power must be a part of an important part of our total fuel mix if the United States is to achieve simultaneously its economic, its environmental, and its security objectives. Each country will make its own individual choice in that regard, and I am well aware, of course, of the discussions that are occurring across Europe in the period since the disaster of Fukushima. But we view safe and economical operation of nuclear power as an essential part of our future. Let me just touch briefly on the LNG exports issue, and then I'll stop. Many in the room there may be aware that recently the second approval was granted for the export of liquefied natural gas to countries with which the United States does not currently have a free trade agreement in place. This is an important step. There is a queue of some 19 other applications that are before the Department of Energy waiting for a decision. And the department will make decisions based on an assessment of the public interest, which is the terminology that is embedded in our law. We will make a decision on a case-by-case basis for each of the applications going forward. Already it is clear that industry is interested in developing a variety of different LNG export terminals, which has the potential to further
We made it longer than I might have expected.
Oops.
We'll give him 5 seconds or so, and then perhaps, where are our technical team? Shall we perhaps go forward and with our folks in the room? I think that's the best thing, and then when we get Johnathan back, we'll cycle him back into the discussions. Well, we just touched on LNG from the U.S. perspective, and we also talked about the shale revolution. So I wonder, Pani Minister, if you would talk to us about how Poland looks in particular at the shale issue. You're well aware of questions that investors, Polish and non-Polish, have about what kind of regime Poland is going to pursue. And the Americans are well aware of questions Poland has about U.S. involvement in technology sharing and investment, as well as questions about LNG. So I wonder if you could address some of those for us.
Thank you very much for this question. Our energy sector so far is very much, by historical reasons as well, coal-driven. More than 60% of our energy is produced from coal. At the same time, as far as we talk about gas, our consumption in Poland is below the average consumption in Europe, which means that there is a room for improvement or for increase. 2/3 of our gas consumption comes from imports. Only 1/3 is being produced here in Poland. So that's why, and 98% of that imported gas comes from one supplier. That's why we are very much motivated to work in order to develop our, diversity at least, and creating wider independency in terms of energy security by developing shale gas sector. Mr. Ambassador, you mentioned at the beginning that some time ago in one of the analytical reports in the United States there was no shale gas expression mentioned. Once in Poland, this expression exists in a public discussion has been existing from actually very beginning. So maybe that's why the public opinion is very much supporting the development of shale gas sector, seeing the opportunities for the country as well as the opportunities for the region and Europe. I think that, well, everybody in this room knows all those figures, how shale gas sector development in the United States, what kind of impact it had to the economy. And of course, we have to think about the environment, but first we have to think what kind of, how big impact this sector might have for the economy, especially nowadays when we are still in the deep crisis. So following the American example, we believe that it's worth investing, spending the efforts and developing this sector. Of course, talking about the US example, we might define that shale gas sector is more business-driven or business-oriented or business-driven, has the business-driven approach. While in Europe, this is more government regulations driven approach, which means that we are we have to follow the strict regulations coming from the European Union regulatory framework. Fortunately, in this case, as far as energy mix is concerned, the Lisbon Treaty guarantees individual countries to organize their energy mix individually. So that's why this is the role of individual governments and also the challenge for individual governments to put efforts and to prepare the framework, regulatory framework for the development of shale gas. So I said that public opinion in Poland, actually talking about numbers, more than 70% of the public opinion supports development of shale gas. And we are talking about the Transatlantic cooperation. From the very beginning, among those investors who have decided to invest in Poland in order to explore and then produce shale gas, there are big American companies. And this is a very good cooperation, American-Polish cooperation, because this is not only the business level that we should think about, this is also the governmental level, because we have a great cooperation between Poland, US, but also EU, US. Talking about the cooperation, let's not forget about EU-US Energy Council. That covers most important issues regarding energy security, energy sectors, including or in particular shale gas sector. So having the opportunity to benefit from the quite good developed shale gas sector in the States, we may not only follow, we may use this opportunity in order to not to start from the very, very beginning, not forgetting about our individual environment.
Thank you very much. I wonder if I might just follow up with a quick question, which is, and not to put you on the spot too much, what is your sense about the timing of any new regulatory regime within the scope of shale gas development in Poland?
In Poland. Thank you for this question. It's a very good question because actually today we should have started the final stage of discussion about the new regulations to regulate the shale gas or the hydrocarbon sector in Poland. And according to the schedule, we should be ready to present these new regulations to the public opinion by the end of June. And then, of course, there is a legislation process, which means that the Parliament should approve it. But we believe that the most important issue for the investors is to know the direction of the regulations, how the new regulations, because some of these areas must be regulated from the beginning, because we have never had this opportunity to explore and produce gas in such an extent. So we believe that this, let's hope, good news is going to be announced to the industry quite soon.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. And I think we've broken news on two fronts already. Mr. Chairman, we've been talking about developments in the United States and in Central Europe, but this revolution is really worldwide, and you are very much at the forefront of that. I wonder if you could tell us how this looks from some of the different places you've been operating, not just in the area of shale either, but in a variety of different energy sources.
Proszę Państwa,
Ladies and gentlemen,
po pierwsze nie jestem na czele
first of all, I'm not
uważałem, że rewolucja jest
front-runner of
najgorszym
the revolution. The revolution,
z możliwych
as I
scenariuszy
hold, is the
rozwoju.
worst scenario of development, because revolution
Pozwala
allows you to
Europie i świecie przez ostatnie
live here, has allowed us to live here in
70 lat
Europe
pokoju.
and worldwide
Ale strasznie się
in
cieszę z
peace for
dyskusji, bo ona
70
pokazuje
years.
jedno.
I'm very glad
Pokazuje
because
jedno,
of the
że
discussion, because this is
porównując
showing one
rynek,
thing. When you
powinniśmy
compare,
porównywać
namely, when you
warunki energetyczne,
compare
rynek europejski
two
i
energy
rynek
markets, the European
amerykański.
energy markets and
Wydaje się,
the US
Stanów
energy
Zjednoczonych.
market,
Wydaje się, że
it seems
miks
that the mix
jest prawie taki sam.
is quite the same. I have a look at the materials, and
w Stanach Zjednoczonych 16%
And in the US, 16% is renewable energy. In Europe, it is 20%. Nuclear power, it is 17% in the States. In Europe, it is 27%, which is a merit of France. Lignite and hard coal is 30% in the States. In Europe, it is 25%. And in terms of gas, it is increasing, but it is 30% in the States, and in Europe, it is something like 20%. These are quite comparable numbers. When we talk about the installed capacity in Europe, it is 928,000 of megawatts, 1 million in the US, 1,150,000, and all of a sudden there are two figures that will change the picture. In the States, you consume something like 13,000 megawatts per person. In Europe, 5,000. And the price of energy in the States is less than $10, and in Europe, $25. So this is what I have considered. How is it possible? And this is a basic question. And the differences are not based on the fact that the shale gas is not only changing the economic map of the world. And I think I say that I'm saying that the US deserve the credit for being very innovative in this respect, because it has seemed that China would, overtake the US, but it is not the case. There was in Victoria Station there was a poster that I saw. There was some rhinoceros standing on the bank of a river, whining. And they say time makes everything, means everything in front of the Noah's Ark departing. I mean, time is the most important factor because of this, the economic map of the world has changed completely. The fact that the US, because of the fact that they have shale gas at a very low price, like $55 per cubic meter, where the price is oscillating around 500 square meters, the US have become the exporter of hard coal, which actually led the price of coal fluctuating. So this may have enormous, big impact on the economy, because we know what will follow. We know what will follow after the prices of oil will go down to $70 per barrel. What political impact it will have on Russia, on the Arab countries, and we know that perfectly now, that the success, behind the success, there are two important factors. The technology, which we do not have in Europe. That's why the States were able to master the cheap exploration of gas resources, and to be honest here, it's all about politics, because the States is private economy and Europe is state-owned economy, and the fact that the prices of energy look like this, they are double as high with, with half of the consumption, which means they are fourfold higher in Europe. This is based on several factors, and this I would refer to the politicians. They should understand that the European market is based on the local state monopolies. This is the case in France, in Germany, in Poland, and we should actually draw our conclusions out of this. Another thing is that this is the fact that the prices of fuels are higher here than anywhere in the world, but another thing is the taxation of energy based on solid fuel, coal and stuff like this. Our policy, CO2 policy, and I'm the boss of the Green Cross Association, and I'm really very much into ecology and the climate that should be free of CO2, but we know that the politics, the policy of taxation, additional taxation, CO2-based taxation on such expensive production of energy will have only one result, the European production, where we can actually pride ourselves that we, although we only 7% of the world population and 19% of the gross domestic product, but we have over 50% of all the social expenditure worldwide, and this is something that nobody will withstand. So I don't know how much shale gas resources we should find to allow ourselves to pay for this social policy. This debate should show one thing here in Europe, for us to understand that certain things should not be discovered. You should not invent the wheel anew. Like new acts. I don't want to comment on them, but I have compared the approach of shale gas acts in Norway, Holland, and our acts. So they really deviate. They go apart. We actually do not. We have not done anything yet. We are not ready yet to invest
powinniśmy
billions of
spojrzeć na
dollars
Stany
into
Zjednoczone,
pilot projects, and
przede
we
wszystkim z jednego powodu.
should look at the
I
States
zastanowić się,
from one
dlaczego tam jest ten
perspective. We should
sukces
actually
tak
consider
wielki,
why the
dlaczego Stany
success there
Zjednoczone
was so
pokazują światu,
overwhelming, why
jak
the
wychodzić
US
z
is
kryzysu.
showing
Nie
you to
dyskusją,
the world
nie
how you get
ustawodawstwem,
out
nie,
of your crisis, not
kontrolą
by
stołem
any discussion, by any
techników,
legislation,
tylko pozwoleniem
by
ludziom,
any
którzy się na
roundtable
własny
discussion.
rachunek, za
But
własne
you just
pieniądze
have to
potrafią
allow the
zaryzykować,
people to
zainwestować i
take the
pokazać
chance
światu, że
for their
że
own
wszystko jest
money, and they should actually be able to show to the world that they are able to perform. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much. I'm sure there'll be some back and forth on the panel about this, but it's very important perspective, and we appreciate it. Johnathan, we haven't forgotten you. We're all very impressed by the fact that you folded your hands so well and so patiently for the entire discussion. I'd like now to turn the floor to John Schmitz. And John, I wonder if we could make you our kind of honorary transatlanticist. There's a lot of questions, not only in Poland, but really everywhere, about how, I mean, to state the obvious, how Berlin is going to square its post-Fukushima policies on nuclear, its general positions with respect to green energy, upcoming elections, with its need for its own economic health and competitiveness to meet its energy requirements. So if you don't mind taking that role, we would be very grateful.
Well, thank you very much, and let me add how honored I am to be here on the panel today, fill-in as it is, and I should add one note to your kind introduction. I am one of Fred's directors of the Atlantic Council, and I'm honored to serve in that capacity, and gotten to know Fred over the years in Berlin when we served on various boards together. I'm an American, not a German, and I ran into Joschka Fischer on my way in, who's a dear friend and one of Germany's energy greats. I really admire everything about Joschka Fischer's career and leadership on energy issues, and I promised him I'd be on my best behavior in terms of describing what's going on in Germany, and I know that he will correct me instantly as soon as I step off the narrow course. But I'd like to use my time to focus on German-U.S. relations in the natural gas and transatlantic space, starting with a story or a little bit of a prediction offered to me by your former colleague in Berlin, Ambassador Phil Murphy, who described his view of the next decade as being governed by two megatrends, the one that we've been talking about here a lot, obviously the revolution in shale gas and shale oil in the United States, hardly to be overestimated, as some of the statistics have provided us, and the German decision. Germany's not the only economy in Europe. It's a very powerful locomotive right now, and its choices on energy tend to have a very broad impact. But their decision to take a different course from a different starting point, most important event obviously was the decision post-Fukushima to install a moratorium and then eventually phase out nuclear power. But I think their hesitation, we don't know where they're going to come out on shale gas. There was a decision by the Merkel government earlier this spring to propose legislation that would provide for conditional approval of shale gas moving forward. There was a later, more recent decision to postpone any action on shale gas until after the September 22nd national elections in Germany. So we'll see. It'll be an election issue. And just like in the United States, just like in France where shale gas is largely banned, the politics are foremost here. And I appreciate the previous presentation for bringing politics into the picture. Ambassador Murphy's vision is that for some time going forward, the revolution in the United States, which has resulted in dramatically lower energy costs overall, primarily because of the availability and the low cost of natural gas, which has supplanted coal, as we heard from the Department of Energy, substantially in power production. And the comparable situation in Germany where there are various estimates, but let's just go from a sort of an average estimate that the cost of power production in Germany is about 3 times what it is in the United States. When you factor that into decisions made by manufacturing, we're going to see a lot of movement of manufacturing capital from Germany to the United States in a free trade and in a free investment environment, and we should be happy about that. There's a countervailing opportunity here for the United States to start exporting its natural gas. We should be in favor of that. That's going to end up lowering energy costs in Germany. It'll end up equalizing. There will be an arbitrage across the Atlantic, and that will be good for everyone. In the meantime, though, Ambassador Murphy thinks, and I think he's right, that these things will take some time, and there's going to be something like a dramatic primary effect in the German-American trade market of seeing increased exports in the investment flow, increased investments from Germany and the United States. Just to give you one quick example, Texas, this has already begun. Texas last year passed California as the primary exporter on the state level to Europe. Louisiana, you wouldn't think of them as being in the top 10. They moved up to position 8. They're now ahead of Massachusetts, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. This is just to sort of, you can't overstate what's happening in the United States. So I think that we should, bear that in mind. I want to add one other perspective. My expertise coming out of the White House of the first George Bush, and I see Stephen Hadley here. We served in that administration together. Great to be here with you, Stephen. We worked on a natural gas project of a different name and in an entirely different set of assumptions. We worked on the Clean Air Act amendments of 1990, where we had the assumptions that you referred to at the beginning, Mr. Ambassador, that natural gas was in short supply. We prohibited fuel switching. We had regulations like prevention of significant deterioration at EPA that Bruce Ackerman described in his book, Clean Coal, Dirty Air, was intended to make sure that however we cleaned our air, the one thing we didn't do was use clean natural gas. And we reversed that in 1990. There were a couple of other pieces of legislation after that that have largely freed natural gas up from very restrictive regulations. But I want to tie in the environment now in a very pro-free trade, pro-free market way. Both Europe and the United States had significant reductions in greenhouse gas emissions. In 2008, everyone largely regarded those reductions as being attributable to the economic situation. Then there were upticks in both Europe and the United States the following year. And now the most recent data for 2011, it's going down again in both the United States and in Europe, but for very different reasons. The reason that US greenhouse gas emissions are going down is because the fuel mix in fossil fuel power production has switched dramatically to natural gas from coal, and natural gas is a much more climate-friendly fossil fuel. In Europe, the climate intensivity of fossil fuel has increased. They've made their gains in reducing greenhouse gases in entirely different ways, resulting in higher energy prices, tying back to the initial point. But I just, want to tie all these things together because we had the earlier panel talking about, the TTIP, and I think that there's going to be an enormous opportunity for Europe and the United States in this energy space to use the TTIP to further free trade. Free investment's pretty much there, as I was describing earlier, and hopefully to make dramatic changes in European energy policy.
And I wonder, with a very brief follow-up, because I want to give everybody a chance to ask questions. And again, thank you for assuming the awkward position of representing the views of another place, but obviously a place with which you're very familiar. In the States, one of the ways we talk about shale is as a transition to technological developments that will then get us to a space where we can pursue non-renewable options on a cost-effective basis. But there's my understanding is there's a lot of skepticism or debate about that in Germany. I wonder if you could give us a little bit of sense about how it looks from that perspective.
Well, again, the environmental considerations are very important in Germany, as they are in the United States. In both Germany and in the United States, the environmental communities are split. In the United States, you have the Environmental Defense Fund working with Chevron and the other majors, and they've been heavily criticized by the other environmental organizations, including international organizations. I think I would offer my opinion, to be corrected by Joschka Fischer, but I would offer my opinion that Germany is more sensitive to the view in the environmental community that we don't want a bridge fuel. We'd rather have higher prices, skip the bridge, let's get to the final goal line of renewable fuels. It's a difference in approach that's, as I said, is not uniformly shared among environmental groups.
Thank you very much. And Secretary Elkind, before the technology gods take you away, would you be kind enough just, and I'd ask you briefly if you don't mind, we got most of what you said about LNG, but I don't think we got the punchline. And I think in this audience, people will be very interested in hearing, in particular, what you think are the prospects for exports generally, at what magnitude, and whatever you can say specifically about to this part of the world.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry for the interruptions. I cannot address or prognosticate about the total magnitude simply because there are ongoing regulatory processes. I can tell you that if you were to sum up all of the applications that are pending, in theory, huge point, in theory you could end up with very significant export quantities in excess of 200 billion cubic meters per year. But of course, and this goes to the point that Mr. Schmitz was just making, the market will mediate and will determine what ultimately makes sense in terms of where natural gas is attractive. It is important in that regard to stress that it's not simply a matter of comparing the landed gas price in Europe to the Henry Hub price, the marker price in the United States. There is also, if one moves LNG to Europe or to anywhere from the United States, there are costs associated with liquefaction and with transport. So it's not a fair comparison to make in that sense. So bottom line is, I don't know how large the ultimate quantities of exports from the United States may be. That will be for the market to determine. Let me touch briefly, though, also on another key element in this picture, which is public confidence. And this goes as much to the question of the extent to which Germany or Poland or other European countries will develop their shale gas resources as it does to the United States. The confidence of the public in each of our respective settings is based in part on the demonstrated practice by industry and the belief, which can only be founded on actual information, that the environmental considerations will be duly identified, honored, respected by industry as well as by governments, relevant government entities, regulators. This is something that obviously has been an open question in Europe. In the United States, it is something that we have tried to address head on by looking at good practice in industry and good practice by regulators. As we continue that effort, we have very high confidence in the U.S. government that shale gas reserves in the United States can be and are being developed in a responsible manner. But I wanted to put this point out on the table because this is something that European voters will have to convince themselves of and be convinced of. And that calls for a very well-informed, well-grounded, information-grounded dialogue between industry, among industry, the voting public, and relevant governments.
Thank you very much, and I think the Secretary will agree, things didn't and don't always go perfectly in the United States either, and there are a lot of lessons learned which have been incorporated, and actually the Department of Energy has done a very good study on exactly that subject, which was critical in some areas about ways in which some of the industry could do things better with respect to water management, some air pollution issues and others, and the department's to be commended for that, and it's good reading.